Welcome back to Hitting Your Stride. I'm your host, Tracey Mitchell, and I'm thrilled you've joined us for another exciting episode of this podcast. Joining me today is Meg Krueger, the CEO of Equestrian Canada and one of the more prominent figures in equestrian circles right now. She's coming off of a successful run as Equestrian Canada's president, as well as being owner and creator of Pepper Fox, an equine marketing and growth strategy company. Her resume is long, but her list of volunteer accomplishments is just as distinguished, as shown by stints with the Young Professionals of Wellington, the Ontario Hunter Jumper Association, the Halton Hills Chamber of Commerce, and the Canadian Jumper Development Series. After earning her honors BA in European Business Studies at the University of Guelph, Meg then headed to France, where she earned a business diploma from the Université de Montpellier to cap off her post-secondary education and also feed her hunger for travel. So welcome, Meg. Why don't we hear a little from you about yourself? Maybe starting off with who you are when you're not in the CEO's role. I hear you have a new addition to your furry family.
Thank you, Tracey. I'm very appreciative of being invited today. I do have a new addition. I just adopted a second rescue dog about a week ago. She's about 6 months old and came in from Texas. So who am I? I'm a big lover of animals, as you might be able to tell. I have two dogs. So my other dog is named Lucky. She's also a rescue. I also have two retired horses. They're both 19. One was a jumper, and the other actually was a ranch horse that I rescued when I lived in Colorado. All of my life, I have been someone who is taking in and helping animals, especially those that have been, I guess, turned away from or the world has discarded. So outside of my role as CEO of Equestrian Canada, I do spend a lot of time outdoors. I love hiking. I'm often at the barn. I'm not riding my horses because they are retired, but I cherish the time that I spend with them, just brushing them, doing groundwork, and just being around them. I also love being at horse shows. I started working in equestrian sport because of that deep love of animals that I had, and of course, horses in particular. And I know I'm very fortunate to be able to spend my days and evenings and weekends with horses in my life, whether it's on the sport admin side or whether it's in the barn. And also even when I travel, because my other out of work love is exploring new cultures and countries through travel.
Yeah, your experiences with all the travel is quite interesting. We'll touch on that in a little bit. Awesome. So your resume highlights a lot of impressive qualities and traits. Sorry, you're forward thinking, group oriented, and a sense of curiosity. Out of all the things you think best describe you, is there one you can point to that effectively can sum up who you are?
I'm not sure I can sum up myself with one trait. I certainly wish it was that simple. But I can say that one of the traits that has made a significant impact on my life is my aptitude to push beyond my comfort level. So challenging my thoughts about myself or what I'm able to do. It's like when you ask yourself, Meg, are you sure you can do this? And then you don't even answer, you just do it. It's implied. You're going to try. So I'm not used to being given opportunities on a platter. I've worked really hard throughout my life for my achievements. I've been driven by wanting to make a difference in the world around me. And I've taken a lot of opportunities on that push me to try new things and then to realize that I had skills in areas I never knew were possible. So an example, you mentioned it earlier, but it started in university. I was originally there. I was at the University of Guelph studying English and literature because I love creative writing. And after my first semester, I found out that someone unrelated to me, but connected by a past marriage, had passed away and had left me some of her inheritance. And it was just enough to cover my entire university tuition, which for me was shocking. Nothing like that had ever happened to me in my life. It didn't seem right to me to keep doing my major in English or maintaining the status quo. For some reason, that surprise gift made me realize that I should use the education to do something that I would have never thought possible. So I did a quick check on my subject skill sets. So I was very strong at English, math, and science. Those were my focus areas to that point in my life, and decided that I was going to change my university studies to business, which I'd never done before. And to be honest, that moment changed my life forever. It took me to France. It took me on an incredible career path in business, and then eventually starting my own business, and now here in my role with EC.
Wow. I love that. Goosebumps. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, that is just so cool. I mean, how many people make that conscious decision to say, all right, I'm going to do something that is completely out of the realm of anything I ever thought before because I want to like push my growth. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was, when I think about it, I was 17 years old when I made that decision.
Wow.
So,
Have you
yeah.
ever, oftentimes I play the game of, because when you've got that, you come to a fork in the road in your
Hmm.
life, and there's a certain point that becomes very like, okay, if I take this, that would happen. If I take this, that. Have you ever been in that situation where you could maybe go back to that moment and think, if I had to have gone to the left and I had chosen
Hmm.
the right fork in the road, where do you think Meg would have ended up?
It's tempting to think that way. I don't often think that way because I've come to those crossroads a lot in my life, and I know that if I wait and I reflect and I go into my gut, so into my instinct, I will know exactly what I need to do, and I don't usually ever question the decision because it's right. I had a acupuncturist once years ago, and I was asking her a question about a hard decision I had to make in life, and she said, "Your life is like a river. It's always moving forward. It's bending and turning, and it's moving the way the river wants to go." And she said, "No matter what way you turn, it'll be the right turn because it's the decision that you make." So
Yeah.
I always thought that was an interesting
Nice.
perspective.
And too, like I'm reading a book right now that was written like forever ago, but still all of its, thoughts and theories and philosophies are so relevant still today. And one of the chapters is on decision making, and that some of the greatest leaders or people who have had the greatest impact in life are good at making just quick decisions. They don't sit
Mhm.
and ponder too long. They just kind of go with the flow, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. That's
exactly.
awesome. Cool. So you have a profound sense of adventure, starting by going to France to continue your post-secondary education and further it by trekking across the Siberian mountains in Mongolia. Is that, at least in part, what fuels you to seek new challenges in your career?
Yeah, I would say, to answer that, I start off with, years ago, I assessed my own personal values, and I have three primary personal values. They're happiness, adventure, and freedom. And those values have consistently guided me throughout my life. And for the most part, they haven't changed. So I believe that, kind of like what I was saying a few minutes ago, when you live true to your values, it brings you more fulfillment and happiness. You know that what you're doing is the right thing to do for yourself. So because those three values are so important to me, they really fuel everything I do and all the decisions that I make. So one of them, and you mentioned adventure, one of my three most important values is adventure. And I honestly don't know where the desire or the draw towards adventure comes from. I think it might be genetic, or at least that it was part of me when I was born. I know riding can be a pretty thrilling sport. And personally, I've always liked the rush of trying something terrifying just to see what it will do to me, like what I will learn from it as I go through it. Like, I can give you an example. I've in the past had some apprehensions about flying, which many people do. So a few years ago, I decided to go up in a glider plane, with a pilot who was flying the plane. And I both learned and felt what it felt like to ride thermals when there is no engine. And it taught me a lot about turbulence and kind of how a plane moves through the air. And it gave me a lot of peace and understanding, I guess, in that process. So it's it's one of those things that I believe we're primarily only limited by ourselves in life. If a goal is really important to you, there's always a way that you can achieve it, as long as you're willing to put the time in to get there, as long as you have determination and conviction that you can achieve it. And that, I think, at the end of the day, achieving it is more important than the possibility you might fail trying. So again, one of my favorite quotes is, it's a Wayne Gretzky quote actually, but it's the "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And it's one that was often shared to me, not by Wayne Gretzky, of course, but by a former employer and one of my mentors, Mark Bellissimo, who I worked for in Florida, and who was a real visionary in sport, in equestrian
Wow.
sport.
Wow. I love the fact you touched on values. So many of the listeners know that, yes, I'm a registered equine massage therapist. I've been doing that for like 23 years, but I'm also, this podcast originated out of me getting certified for life coaching. So one of the activities that I work on with my clients is bringing their focus to understanding what their values are. And so we go through this values worksheet and, discussing different values. And I think the way that you expressed that was absolutely like bang on. If as long as you figure out what your values are, that becomes sort of your focus, and then letting those help guide you where you go from there on, and what's enjoyable and what you want to experience in life. Yeah.
Absolutely. The value exercise was, I started working on it years ago, but it was so critical because sometimes I think you can keep values outside of you as a person or outside of you and your job, and it's just a word. But when you look at yourself and say, you give a description to who you are inside and the things that are, if I can't have those three things, is my life giving me fulfillment? Am I, do I want to keep going? And if the answer is no, then that they're deal breakers. Those values are the most important things for you to live by, to be true to yourself.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. No, I hope this conversations encourages people to reflect on that, because it's in such a crazy busy life. We're always running around. I think a lot of the times the values that we hold dear can kind of be, sift to the bottom of what we do. So yeah. So this is awesome. Can you touch a little bit on your trekking in the Siberian mountains? That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Please
absolutely.
share.
It's a long story that I can make a short story. It started with somebody giving me a book, and it was called Horse Boy. And I read the book, and it was a true story. A documentary was also done about a man, originally Zimbabwean, from Texas, who had a son high on the spectrum of autism. Long story short, he ended up going with his wife and his son to Mongolia on a shamanic trek for his son. And it was an amazing experience. I read the book and I thought, how can this be possible and real in the world? And so my next thought was, I need to do this exact same. I need to experience what they went through. I mean, as much as I could, of course. So I reached out to the agency that was in the documentary that took them on this trip. And I said, I want to do the same trip as Rue. And he said, no problem. And introduced me to Rupert. And concurrently, we became friends. I had a chance to meet Rupert several times when I lived in the US. That was the father. And then next thing you know, I ended up on this trek, on a shamanic journey, going through, just experiencing what it's like. Number one, in Mongolia, we went in the summer, which was thankful because it was still very cold, but it was absolutely incredible. And the end culmination of the trip was, we traveled cross country from Ulaanbaatar, the capital, into the Siberian mountains. We were somewhere near the Russian border, but weren't exactly sure where we were. And we stayed for a few days with the Satan people, who are an indigenous group that ride and herd reindeer, and they live off the land. And we stayed with the head shaman of one of the two tribes, and had a shamanic ceremony and learned about the people. And I rode a reindeer and unsuccessfully. And yeah, it was an incredible experience.
Wow. Life-changing, I am sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Who did you come out of that experience as? Can you pinpoint something that absolutely changed your outlook on life and who you were when you got home?
I think probably the trek itself was very difficult. It was intensive, like physically and emotionally, to get to stay with them. And the ceremony itself, like the whole experience, was very intense. But I think probably the most impactful thing was before we had a translator. There was a group of 4 of us, and as the shaman was preparing for this ritual he was going to do that evening, he was asking the translator to ask us some questions about why we were there. Like, he was trying to understand why we had all traveled across the world. There was someone from Sweden, there was, I think, someone from the US, and then 2 of us from Canada to come and meet with him. And so I was trying to think in my head, how do I explain to him what I do? Because at the time I was selling corporate sponsorship for the Winter Equestrian Festival, equestrian sport in Florida. And I just wasn't sure if that made, like, how do I explain that in a way that was relevant? And, so I was doing my best. And, he was nodding as the translator, saying, well, I sell sponsorship, for marketing, this and that, for equestrian sport. And he said back to the translator, okay, I get it. So you work with horses. And I said, yeah, I work with horses. And so for me, it was just really impactful to try to articulate what I do in a world that was very different. So I guess that was very, very impactful to me, where I thought that my world was a huge universe, and I realized I'm just a piece of something much greater.
Oh man, that's awesome. I love that. So, I mean, you did touch on this in this question that we just had, but where does your thirst of experiences come from? Thirst for them come from, sorry.
Yeah, kind of like that desire for adventure. My need to experience things, it's just part of who I am. It's just inside me. For me, experiencing something intensely is the reason I'm alive as a person. So when I experience things, like when I travel, when I'm in my day to day, when I'm with my horses, how I feel things, it's just very intense, and it really makes me, I guess, recognize how different and unique things are, recognize the emotional impact of things, and it helps me see and feel what the world is around me, and that gives me a sense of connectedness and understanding.
Wow. Now, were your parents, did this, like, can you remember as a little girl feeling like this, or was this something that you witnessed growing up?
Not so much. I would say that my family is very like science and math based, for the most part. And I think, not that emotions aren't science based, it just, that's why I was studying, math and sciences. I was very good at it. It's very rational and logical. But it was just something that I realized I struggled a lot as a teenager. I had a lot of mental health issues, depression, and so forth. And it wasn't until I went out on my own and I started making these choices to, step into these opportunities and experience things like going to France when you're 18 and living on your own and studying in an environment where you didn't really know the language. And that's when I really started to kind of come into my own. But it took about 10 years to really understand my need for experiencing things.
Wow, that's great. Now, you said that you came to Equestrian Canada at a time when there was a lot of frustration in the community, and that through your passion, you wanted to be a part of building a stronger organization. What was it inside of you that gave you the belief that you could see the necessary changes through? And did it change you in any way by taking this task on?
Yes, working for EC has absolutely fundamentally changed me. I'm a very patriotic person, and I'm very proud of my country. I really wanted to, and I still want to, make a significant difference. I want to be a part of making EC stronger, more effective, or efficient, and then, like, almost most importantly, more meaningful to people. I want to see EC become an organization that's interesting and relevant to future generations of leaders who are one day going to be in my shoes. But not only from an organization perspective, I want to see the impact that horses have had on me personally throughout my life be more available to others. I want to see that part of what I do, and how people experience horses thrive. We all know that horses help us so much, and I've seen them give strength and confidence to so many different people, through my life, and they deserve a really important role in our society. So, back to your question, that EC, there still is frustration, from what I've learned in my time with EC, so about 4 years, and about EC's history. There's probably about 35 years of change, mergers of organizations, new leadership, new plans, reorganizations. There's a lot of history that comes along with everything we do every day. EC is so big and complex, and it interconnects many disciplines, organizations, and people, and all of those stakeholders have needs for EC. So when I took on the role with EC, I did so how I would describe it, like, wholly and completely. So I put aside any potential risk that might come to me personally if I wasn't successful. And I just stepped wholeheartedly into rolling up my sleeves and getting started. And I know that EC won't change overnight. I might have had, initial thoughts that I could move things, or I could be a part of moving faster change. But I don't necessarily think that EC will or should change really quickly. But if enough people put their personal agendas aside and roll up their sleeves to be part of making a difference, we will get momentum, and in the end, we will be successful.
Okay. And what was it in you that felt like, you had the ability to take this task on?
I don't know. I guess it was just that that belief that with the experience that I've had in my life, I had 10 years working in Canada as a horse show organizer. I had 10 years working in the US, learning, building, like growing huge opportunities within the US. And I thought, if what I'm going to apply myself to in my career and my life within the equestrian industry, I want to do it for my country. And I want to see my federation become stronger and become something that people are proud of within Canada, and see results that impact more people across the country. And so, as much as I loved living and working in the US and miss my friends and contacts and everything I did there, to me, this is more important. It's more important to be doing this for my country.
Well, many of us are very thankful that you're doing so. That's great. In your opinion, what is the key to successful leadership? You took over an organization that you said at the time was consumed in disagreement, but then described as having covered a lot of ground in the same time since then.
My idea of successful leadership has evolved a lot over the years, but at this time, I would say that to me, being a successful leader means being vulnerable, humble, and having determined vision. So what I mean by that is you need to acknowledge what doesn't work, what hasn't worked, and not take it personally, but also put that aside. So have an understanding of the information that you're getting from people and from past, maybe repeated patterns, and then have those BHAGs, those big, hairy, audacious goals, and set those goals for yourself and the organization, and then talk about them a lot and rally people around them. Because I believe that people need to feel connected to something bigger than them. And like I had just mentioned, something that they can be proud of. So, for me on a daily basis, I interact with so many people, and they're all very passionate about the sport and the industry, and they can be staff that are working within EC, and it can be volunteers. So, our board of directors is volunteer. We have many operational committees and working groups. And then there's also organizations like our provincial and territorial, or PTSO sport organizations. There's discipline organizations, there's national equine organizations, and all of those groups and people, there's hundreds of people who want to be part of improving the sport and industry, and they're all leading as well. And so I look at them and I see people who are stepping into the fray and doing things to make a difference. And again, when I go back to those big, hairy, audacious goals and the need to rally people in a direction of making a positive change, if all of those people can get moving in a forward, positive direction, then again, we'll be able to make a real difference, rather than sometimes you see time and resources can get wasted and slowed down just by disagreement or people not being aligned. So
yeah, the whole concept of being vulnerable is something that's really been brought up, I don't know what, the last 3-5 years kind of thing. And let's say thanks to Brene Brown. She's she's been a big promoter and discusser of that. And I too follow that. I've always been someone that's kind of worn my heart on my sleeve. I'm open to sharing. If you don't communicate and share, then no one learns. And honestly, I think that's really the premise of this podcast from the very beginning, is I wanted to have people on such as yourself, leaders, and then, you know, the unsung heroes that everybody's got something to teach. So I'm super grateful for having you here today, because your message has been amazing so far. And when you, at the beginning of this question, you touched on that your leadership has evolved. So, you know, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, what was your concept of leadership versus what it is now?
I think that probably one of the biggest difference, and a lot of it came with maturity and just life experience, was being someone who's competitive, driven, and an achiever. You know, my first concepts of leadership was a strong person pushing the ball up the hill, and a lot of it coming from one individual. But I've learned that over time, it's not one individual. One individual can only do enough of things that fit into one individual's day. But if there are many people who are part of a journey, who maybe that individual could inspire to go in a direction or to do something together, then all of those people create something much more impactful. So I think that it's really shifted more from a me-centric to a us-centric thought process. And that's where I think the vulnerability piece and the humbleness piece comes in, because sometimes that's hard. It's hard to hear what people have to say when they say things that, you know, might not be positive all the time, or maybe contradict what you think, or something that you've done, but they're saying it for a reason. And so being able to receive that, recognize it's not personal, take the information, and then kind of be part of creating a solution. To me, that's what being vulnerable, why it's so important in successful leadership.
Yeah, that's great. How did your connection to horses start? And at what point did you just know that this was going to be your life's work? Like, did you ride as a child? Did you show?
Yep, all of the above. I I actually recently found a picture, or was given a picture, that captures my very first pony ride. I don't know if parents still do that these days, but I must have been about 2 or 3 years old, and it was, you know, a typical pony ride at the fair somewhere in the very early '80s. But the camera happened to capture my face, and when I see my face, it must be the exact moment that the pony started moving. And you know, when you know that the horse is moving underneath you, I've seen that many times in my life as I was teaching riding lessons. It's like a click that happens.
Yeah.
And I believe that once that click happens, you're hooked. So that moment started it all. um, but it wasn't until I was older, I started riding. I was probably about 8 years old, that I was just starting to ride more regularly. And as a teenager, I rode in a wonderful riding school in Mississauga, Ontario, and I started helping the owner. We were retraining thoroughbreds off the track. I was showing on the Trillium circuit, which was really big for us, you know, in that era. I started teaching riding lessons. Like, it just kind of started getting bigger and bigger into my life. I was managing the barn while I was doing high school. It was just becoming something really critical. But it was in my early 20s that I came to terms with the fact that my riding skills, as much as I loved riding, they were not going to get me to the Olympics. And I was completely okay with that, because I also had realized that my unique ability in the industry was going to be that I wanted to be the person organizing the horse shows. So
Ah,
fueling the passion and the dreams of equestrians by creating the best possible shows that I could. So I started, I think I was 22, about 22, started running horse shows. And when I was doing the shows, I always wanted to keep raising the bar, challenging the norm, trying new things. You know, I was looking outside of our sport, outside of our country. What are other venues doing? What are other sports doing? Anything that could push me or the events, again, outside of that comfort zone.
yeah.
And that attitude, it gave me a lot of success in what I did as an organizer. And then it also opened up a door for me to take a job in Wellington, Florida, at the Winter Equestrian Festival, which I jumped on in 2007. And I worked for that company for 10 years. And I learned a lot about the equestrian industry in the US. And I got exposure to areas and skills that, again, I had no idea I could do, and that I ended up becoming pretty proficient in. So,
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So, and you've I love the fact that you recognized where your strengths were. So, I mean, do you still hop on a horse when you can? I know that you have two older horses, but like, do you still have a desire to go hacking or do any riding that way?
I do. My jumper, I had him from when he was 3, and I don't ride him anymore just for health reasons. But when I lived in Colorado, he wasn't with me, and I started riding Western, which I've always been an English rider. But I thought, okay, I live in Colorado, I'm going to learn Western, and I rescued this. They called them cow horses there, and she's a ranch horse, and worked with a cowboy, and that really like rejigged some love of riding, because it was all about your relationship with the horse and making the horse work with you efficiently and not burn too much energy, not create too much stress for you, the horse, or the cattle. And so I did some work, basic work, sorting cattle, and I really love that. I'd like to do that more. I don't really have time right now to be in a riding program, so I'm just grooming and doing
Yeah.
groundwork. But
Wow.
maybe in the future I'll do it
That
again.
does sound like fun. That would be something for a bucket list that I would be, yes, having been a dressage rider and stuff
Yeah.
in my day. I was very English based myself. And I'm going to say something totally goofy, but I've talked to other people that have said the same thing, that it was that show Yellowstone, watching,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
riding in those beautiful mountains. I'm like, hello, I could sign up for that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, that the cowboy that I worked with, he was a professional cowboy. And, like you would imagine, a man of little words or few words. But he taught me so much about, not just about cattle, because we would go out and you'd be several hours in the middle of nowhere riding out to the herd. And he would teach me about how you tell if a calf has pink eye. And I never was able to do any like more advanced stuff. I was always I would be the support person. I wasn't actually a cowboy or anything like that. But he it just was really amazing. His number one, his philosophy on life, his philosophy around working with the horse was a relationship about respect, but it wasn't dominance. It was very clear about your role, the horse's role, how you work together to get a task done, building trust. What happens if you make a decision and the horse gets nervous and loses trust in you, and how you have to rebuild it. And I didn't really expect that would, for some reason, be what I would learn.
Hmm.
But I loved it. It was incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally opened up your eyes to a whole different feel and connection with the animal. Yeah.
Yeah.
What piece of advice did you receive and follow, or what life lesson did you learn that helped make your life better?
I would say that I know I mentioned a quote earlier, but one of my ultimate favorite quotes is by Cameron Crowe, and it's been with me throughout my life. I've always thought about this quote. It's, every passing moment is just another chance to turn it all around. And I like that quote. For me, it speaks to me a lot about giving permission to try things at the risk that maybe you'll fail, but then there will be that other minute that follows. And in that minute, you can try again, and you can change the course you're on. You can learn from your mistakes, and you can turn things around. So
Mm.
it's not as much of a life lesson, but it's a piece of advice that has always given me the permission to try.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. And that's key. I mean, so many people have an idea or a passion or an adventure for themselves that they think about, but I'm like, maybe I
mhm,
should, maybe I shouldn't. And yeah, if you don't try, then you don't know.
exactly.
Yeah. So this next question is kind of linked, but what is your philosophy on handling challenges in life, no matter where they arise? So whether it be personal or professional, or based on that, do you have two different philosophies for each of those areas of your life?
Um, my philosophies are pretty consistent. I've had a lot of practice handling challenges because I experience them a lot. That there's a lot of challenges every day in my job, and also personally. Whether it's with working with animals or rescue dogs, or I mean, it's just a constant, I think, for most of us. Um, but I would say that regardless of whether it's work or personal. My philosophy about handling challenges is kind of similar to some of what I've been saying earlier, which is being calm, reflecting, kind of trusting your instinct, and then making decisions that live true to your values. And again, it just, to me, it is, the answers inside of yourself, and challenges they can be very difficult. And I know, for example, like working at EC, the challenges can be constant, and sometimes they don't end for long periods of time. And it can be easy to get demotivated or kind of down from it. But you just need to be calm, believe in yourself, believe in your team and what you're doing. And that's how you're living true to your values. And then let yourself recharge. And again, try again, like the quote, just keep trying.
There's something that keeps coming to my mind as we've been talking, and that's the concept of mindsets. And there's a book out there called Mindset. It's by Dr. Carol Dweck. It's a brilliant book, and it talks about growth mindset and versus your fixed mindset. And everything you're saying is totally growth mindset. It's about testing yourself. It's that not worrying about if you fail, you just keep trying and trying. Whereas a fixed mindset is someone who, is afraid that their attempt won't be perfect. That they could be very talented and have the world by the tail, but they won't venture out and step into that level of discomfort because they're afraid that if they fail, then the world will, lack of a better term, come to an end. And then what are they going to do? Right. So that's something that I love talking to people about, because I think it's such a solid basis of how we can achieve what we want to achieve in life. And I, like you, and it seems a lot of the people that I have on here, I'm a goer. I love to, start new things. And I mean, this podcast, for instance, was a total step outside of my of my comfort zone, but I am completely loving it. And I get the chance to meet people like you and have these amazing conversations. So yeah. And I also feel like when you face these challenges, when you say to remain calm, is there anything in you that, like, this fire that sort of like comes up and just like, okay, like, let's do this? Like, is there a fire? Is there a flame in there? Or is there just always this sort of resonant calm?
I think that that's a very good question, because I have very strong entrepreneurial tendencies. I'm also an entrepreneur, so there is like inside me there's a fire, but I have learned sometimes that the fire, like that there also is it's appropriate to be calm and to reflect, because sometimes the fire can take you down a path that maybe is more emotional, like it's emotionally based. And I think that the calm piece for me is because I've lived and worked in a lot of environments where things are really scary or challenging, or like when I go back to that glider plane, I remember a moment where I realized, I had a clarity that I am in a plane that has no engine, 3,000 feet in the sky, and we're just floating down to the ground. And I immediately kind of panicked and kind of pressed, because you're very close to the edge of the plane. I could stick my hand out a little window and it was in the air.
Wow.
And that was the moment where, for me, that's where the calm piece. So to me, when I say challenges, that's where the calm piece said, you know what, my brain just clicked into another gear and said, you made the decision to be here. There's a pilot, it's going to be fine. Just use this as part of what you're experiencing and just go with it. And so that's kind of what I mean by when I say calm. But the fire, I think that's another thing that's either in you or it's not. If you're a driven person, you have to have that fire if you're going to be a determined person to achieve things. Like I summited Mount Kilimanjaro. I was having dinner with a friend. We were talking about all the great things we could do in life. And she said, do you want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? And I said, yeah. And 6 months later, we were at the top. Taking our photo, by the sign. And it's just one of those things the fire pushes you forward, I guess, to follow your dreams, or to create your dreams, I should say.
Gosh, people have to be careful when they have conversations around you. Oh my goodness, you're inspiring me. I feel like, geez, what else could I do? So How do you celebrate the big and the small victories in life, both personally and professionally?
This is a little tough for me because I know that many people celebrate victories through actions, and I know that that's important to people, and I try to tell myself it's important to me too. So, rewarding yourself, resting, a small token, anything like that. But I think for me personally, because of who I am, the two big things of how I celebrate the big and little victories are, one, it's the celebration is knowing I did a good job and that it was for the right reason. It makes me feel good. So it's a celebration. And the second part is saying thank you to those who've been part of helping me achieve the victory, or maybe being part of supporting me. Those two things for me would be how I would celebrate, rather than just, doing something like a token for myself.
Wow. That totally resonated with me when, thanking people. Gratitude. I mean, I was raised, by a very community oriented, volunteer based family that was, loves to give back. And so that concept that when someone does something for you in that moment of gratitude, like thankfulness is huge. And the ability to pass on the messages. I mean, in our previous question, you gave advice there that I hope, because I know I'm going to hold on to it, and I'm sure other people will too. So, like, just on that day to day of having that effect on people. And I'm one of those people that at the end of the day, I like to sit and I write in a gratitude journal. And, I make myself put down 3 points, even if it was a crappy day. But at the end of it, there are times where I might have 10 things down on that list. And you're right. It's just appreciating the moments, the energy behind things. Would you say that you're a real energy based person?
Yeah, I definitely, energy is like a big driver for me, for certain. And I think the direction of the energy, and what I mean by that, like when you were talking, it was making me think about a memory I had with Rupert, the father from Horseboy. We were having lunch one day in Boulder, Colorado, and we were talking about fulfillment. And I asked him, what did he attribute fulfillment in life? And he said, Meg, it's all service. It's what you do for others and not expecting anything back. And that really resonated with me, because it kind of also ties to leadership and what I was saying earlier about when the energy is focused inside you, versus when the energy is focused on outside of you, on what you can do to help, you know, things that you're never going to get anything back from. That, I'm not going to benefit if the equestrian industry grows in Canada. It doesn't matter. I just want to see it improve.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see more people have access to horses, because they were my root and my foundation throughout my life. When I struggled with mental health, when I have a stressful day at EC, I can go to the barn, I open the door, the stress just evaporates. So I think that energy piece, I think, is really important when it's directed towards helping others.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Great advice there. And absolutely, hopefully that'll resonate with them, and then they can work on that for themselves.
Mhm.
So last question here. You were named one of horse sports top 50 influencers for 2020. How does that kind of recognition impact you on a day-to-day real world basis? And how do you follow up on something like that?
I'm I'm always appreciative of recognition. Being recognized in that horse sport top 50 influencers in 2020, it was really meaningful for me. It is nice to know that others see the work and passion that I have for the industry, and they share it and they recognize that it's beneficial. But I think for me, it's not an ending that needs a follow up. I'm sure you might already have concluded. For me, I'm on a path in my life, and I've had already a great deal of incredible and unique experiences. I'm 44. I've had so many things that I've been able to experience and learn from, and people that I've met all over the world. And I see life as a continuum, and it's not one success that then has another one that tops it, but that it just continues to move forward. And because I'm so driven by the experience that life has and all of the ups and downs that you live, I know that everything that I do and experience in the future will be part of what makes me alive as a person. So I see many more things that I'll do in my life ahead, and there will be great things and there will be failures. But at the end of the day, that is really what drives me, as opposed to kind of how I top one success with another.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some things in lives when our lives, we can look at them and go, okay, check, I did that. That's awesome. But then
Yeah.
there's that other part of us where if you take a look outside, you step outside of yourself. And if you were to take a look at your life, if you see this trajectory, yes, you might have a couple of valleys but growth always happens at that point, and then you head up onto the next one. And yeah, it's the evolution of who you are. I mean, I've turned 50, I'll be 51 this year, and it really makes you reflect. I have to be
Yeah.
honest. It does. I was like, whoa, what have I done in my life? Who have I helped? What left can I do with what I've learned about me? Right. It's a constant conversation I have. And yeah, your journey, just, I'm very excited to see what left you are going to do, because do you have anything else on your bucket list? Any more mountains to climb, or?
Um, I don't know, because it's funny for me. I don't really have a list of things. They come to me like a desire, I guess. Just one day I'll say, okay, I want to go to Colombia, and then I'm booking a trip and I'm there. It's just one of those things that sometimes it's triggered by a conversation I have, or something I see or read or experience, and then I feel inside the desire to do that as well. And sometimes it's just it's not driven by something. It's just a curiosity about an area I was in. A few years ago, I went to Istanbul in Turkey, and I wanted to go because I was interested in the economy. So I was building my business at the time, and I went and ended up not only starting. I went to a trade show, so it was an equestrian trade show. But then from there, I met one person that met another person, and I traveled. I met veterinarians. I traveled to show jumping facilities, endurance facility. I mean, it was just unbelievable how people will open up their door if you ask, and
Yes.
show you their world. So
Yeah.
it's that's kind of how I make decisions about travel and adventure.
Wow. Wow, Meg, I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. Taking some time to getting to know you has been an amazing start of my day. Very,
Oh,
very inspiring. And thank you for sharing your stories and etc. How can people reach out to you if they have any questions about anything they've heard here or anything about EC?
I would love to hear from people. The easiest email is ceo@equestrian.ca. So
Okay.
that comes to me, and I would really love to hear from people, whether it's stories or if there's anything that resonates with them, or again, if they have any questions about EC, anything like that.
That is awesome. Well, thank you, Meg. Again, this has been just wonderful.
Thank you, Tracey. I really appreciate it.